Hello everyone, I'm back with another video for you today, and with the introduction of Syndicate, the new faction, it got me really thinking about Gwent, the game in general, the kind of resources that are in the game, and what could improve about it. In fact, I've been thinking about a lot of new mechanics that could be added and I feel would be really cool to spice up the game. I think the coin system that is kind of unique to the Syndicate faction is something that hasn't really been explored since even closed beta, when the factions had their own kind of unique passive abilities for every leader that was shared amongst all leaders in the faction. And I think that's something the game is really lacking, and something that was taken away from the game. And I'm gonna give some ideas, some suggestions on a way that you could maybe implement that stuff using this kind of coin system and applying it to other factions in ways that will make the factions more unique and diverse and with more identity than they have right now. It also got me thinking about right now which factions are more kind of fleshed out than others. I'm looking at kind of Skellig being, quite thematic and strong in terms of its identity, compared to stuff like Nilfgaard, which is a bit all over the place, or even Gwent, which doesn't exactly know what it wants to do. And the other thing I noticed was with Crimson Curse, there was the introduction of mechanics for every faction that felt very unique. And I think that's part of the reason why the expansion felt so good, that one. Just a lot of new stuff, you had Harmony for Gwent, you had Berserk for Skellig, you had Formation for Northern Realms, Assimilate for Nilfgaard, and what was the other one? There was something for monsters, but I can't remember. But, was it... what was it? I can't remember. Okay, whatever. But there was one. That's the point. So really, I think those things helped to increase the kind of factional diversity, the real feeling of the faction that each one had, and we need more of that, I think. So here I've kind of got some equivalent systems to the coin system that I think could be introduced that would both help to kind of even out the factions in power level, hopefully. Obviously you'd need to change a lot of cards around and do balancing, and don't get me wrong, I don't think this will end up happening. It would probably require too much work from CDPR, and probably isn't even the direction they want to take, but either way, hopefully this is entertaining and give you some thoughts on what I've been thinking about. So basically the idea is to have a similar system to the coin system for each faction, but they'd all be working in a very different way, with their own little twists and turns on the formula. So with Syndicate you have coins, right? You have the crowns, you can get 9 of them and they halve every round. So with these other factions, they each have I've come up with something that they could have as an equivalent to coins that would help their faction to work in the way that they want it to work. So first things first, we have Northern Realms. Everyone knows Northern Realms is a bit of a weird state at the moment in terms of it wants to play a lot of order effects, but you're looking at Syndicate, who have Zeal on a lot of their order effects, or if not all of them, and it makes Northern Realms look pretty bad. Well, what if we gave conscription to Northern Realms? Instead of having coins, Northern Realms has conscription, or conscripts, or whatever you want to call it. Now this could be a max of 4 charges. The numbers could change, but I think 4 would be reasonable, and that would half each round. And basically what conscription would be allowing for is giving Zeal and Shield to your units. So this would allow you to protect and get immediate value from engines, in the same way kind of that Syndicate does, but with the caveat that Northern Realms will have more powerful engines. Their kind of flair has always been they have very strong abilities. If you're able to get the abilities to go off, you get a lot of points, but they're a bit vulnerable because they're order effects. Well, conscription would help because it would give them a bit of zeal, a bit of shield, a bit of protection on their units, and we'll talk about the individual mechanics within the faction that I have for each in a second here. So that's kind of the general idea for Northern Realms. I think it would work quite well with the theme of the faction already, and a lot of cards already kind of working with that idea. But that's the idea of the faction. You can see on the right here, the faction focuses powerful abilities on order effects, zeal, shield. That's kind of what Northern Realms is trying to do. So next up we have monsters. Monsters is actually quite well fleshed out already. They already have Death Wish, Dominance, and Thrive, which are, pretty cool mechanics, and they're all working quite well, and they're pretty strong. So the other thing I wanted to introduce is Hunger, and this would have no max cap, unlike coins, unlike conscription. You could just go up and up and up and up, provided you would be able to do that, but it would be halved each round again, working as a bit of carryover, but cutting that back, to be reasonable. And we'll talk about how you generate hunger in a second, but really, I think this would add a little bit to the already existing and prevalent Death Wish mechanic. Pretty much I'm adding this one in just so monsters doesn't get left out or left behind with all these other mechanics being implemented, they could have this little extra thing that we'll talk about in a second. Next would be Intel or Intelligence for Nilfgaard, and this would kind of work very well, I think, thematically with the idea of deception, spying units, disloyal, treacherous guys, trying to fickle, get their way into the opponent's backlines and whatnot. So with this one, maybe you could have max 10 charges. I'm kind of just making the numbers up, but I think maybe 10 would be fine. And again, halved each round. And as we've said before, the idea with Nilfgaard has always been about deck manipulation, kind of using your opponent's tools against them, controlling the board, and so we're going to try to keep all of that stuff still the same, as well as assimilate when I talk about the way that these mechanics will work. So for ST, we want to have ambushes, I think. This is very cool, and this is kind of... ST should be really the guerrilla warfare faction, right? Harmony is cool, and sure, that can stay, but really they need some other mechanics in there. Skirtel is kind of really lacking. So with ambushes, you could have 5 charges, and they would reset each round, potentially. And they could maybe be more powerful or more easy to get than the other factions if they're resetting each round. Partly the reason I think these the ST's mechanics shouldn't carry over is they already have quite a bit of carryover in hand buff. So I'm not sure giving them even more carryover would be a great idea. They already have quite a lot of it. But really, the themes of ST are ambushes, traps, hand buffing, and harmony, right? So if we can preserve that, that'd be great. And with Skellig, I figured veterancy would be cool. I think veterancy was one of the coolest mechanics, and I've got kind of a cool and neat way, I think, that you could implement it back into the game with this kind of factional, passive coin system for each faction thing. But with veterancy, you'd have no max on it and no change each round, so you could go up and up and up. You could build veterancy forever and ever until you reach a peak, in theory. But Skellige's pretty fleshed out as a faction already. You've got self-wounding, damaging with bloodthirst, and then I'm going to add in this veterans and champions idea, and of course discard as an archetype is also a thing. So let's go and now talk about what actually is involved in getting all of these passive abilities in my idea, and how what that would mean, how you'd go about it. So here we go. So, for Northern Realms, we have several abilities that cards could be given, that could be changed around. Obviously, this would take a huge amount of work, so, again, don't get me wrong, I don't think this will ever happen, but it would be very, very cool, in my opinion, to see it. So what could we have? We could have Recruit as a keyword, so you gain X amount of conscription. So this is like the Prophet ability for Syndicate. You're just going to get a certain amount of conscription, maybe 1, maybe 2. You don't want to get too much. Obviously, if the cap is 4, then is what it is. I didn't want to make the cap higher for Northern Realms because giving Zeal to units, carrying that over could potentially be very, very strong. Then you can just give Zeal to all your really powerful engines, so you probably don't want to carry over more than a couple of charges on that, maybe. Okay, then we've got Versatile, so this allows you to spend a certain amount of conscription to gain Zeal on a unit. So you would have this on engines that maybe are pretty good if they get their ability off, but maybe not too good, and that would allow you to get Zeal on some of your guys, maybe think Trebuchets or whatever else that can really benefit from a Zeal like that. You also have Rally. This would work like Horde for Syndicate, so when you're at a certain amount of conscription, this unit would gain Zeal, or it could be another bonus. I think the Zeal would work quite well again with the faction, so you're getting up to the high conscription, then you're playing your Zeal units, and then you're spending the conscription to get more Zeal on your guys. And you want to cap that reasonably low so that Northern Realms can't just go absolutely crazy with Revenants and stuff. But I think that could be pretty cool. Then we also have Elite, so that would allow you to spend conscription to gain a shield. And as you see here, these are deploy abilities, so kind of like a tribute. You pay some conscription, your guy gets a shield. You can protect your engines, and you can give them Zeal as well. I guess you could even have cards that could, in theory, do one or the other, maybe have both options, but the idea here really is to have conscription as a way to get Zeal and shield. We already have Formation, which is allowing you to get Zeal on units, so you could add all of these other types of things in. Just give the faction a bit more diversity with what it can do with its engines and how safe they are, and I think that would make Northern Realms both stronger and a lot more interesting to play, a lot more fun to play. So that's what I would propose for Northern Realms. So next up with monsters, I figured, okay, we've got hunger as a mechanic. How do we make this work thematically? Well, what we could have is whenever a Death Wish unit actually dies, you also gain 1 hunger. So the hunger goes into your bank. So basically you're going to be eating your own Death Wish units, or the opponent maybe kills them, right? And that is making your guys more hungry, effectively. They see their comrades die, they smell the blood or whatever, and they're getting more hungry, right? And then how is this paid off? Well, you have bloodlust. So once your guys are hungry enough, they go crazy and they start killing stuff. So would be like an optional tribute ability, effectively, which allows you to spend all of your hunger and destroy an enemy unit with strength equal to or less than the hunger spent. So effectively, the monster's not going to be the strongest kind of passive ability here with the hunger, but it's going to allow you to, if you're playing some Deathwish cards, which pretty much all monster decks do, at some point you're going to be able to go, okay, now my big Bloodlust unit is coming down, and he's also going to kill one of your guys, as well as being a strong play. And you could maybe, do some crazy stuff with that. And I think it would just help with, like, Deathwish archetypes as well, like full Deathwish archetypes becoming stronger, which right now they aren't very good. But it would also make the average monster deck good as well, right? So I think that would be a really cool thematic and hopefully not too strong, but also pretty fun to play with ability, the hunger aspect there. And also, I figured why not also throw in Cannibalize, just so the faction has kind of 5 keywords. As you see here, I'm trying to make it so each faction kind of has 5 keywords that it can build around that work and that make sense thematically for the faction. So Cannibalize would mean you boost by a certain amount whenever you gain hunger. So this could be on units that consume your own guys. They could then boost themselves an extra amount whenever they consume your Deathwish units, or you could have it on just random units, right, that gain, some kind of bonus. Maybe you put it on Vran Warrior, for example, and he gets boosted whenever, whenever stuff is happening. Oh, I'm getting friend requests. So I think that would be a cool keyword. Maybe you don't have to throw that one in, but I think that is pretty damn thematic. Cannibals cannibalizing their own guys. When the Deathwish units die, they're becoming stronger, and then they're getting hungry and bloodlust. I think it would be very cool. Alright, on to Nilfgaard. This is probably the hardest one to think about and put together, but I think it's pretty damn cool and would make a lot of sense. So, with the intelligence, you could gain that through playing agents. Now, agents could be limited to only disloyal units, so spying units. It could also be some on your side of the board. I'm kind of undecided on which of those, but effectively, I think it makes more sense if you're playing spying units and they're gaining you intelligence, right? So I don't know how much they would give you, that you can balance those numbers accordingly, right? If you play an agent, you get some intelligence. Now, Subterfuge, this allows you to actually spend that intelligence to either lock or deal damage equal to the amount of intelligence you have. So this would kind of be like a fee effect, if you're comparing it to Syndicate, that allows you to both lock and deal damage. I felt with Nilfgaard, a lot of their cards are lock focused, right? So maybe you could give them a bit of flexibility so they don't only have to lock and they can also damage, but also you could make it so locking isn't just the way to do it every time. You can make it so damaging is sometimes a better option than locking, because right now Nilfgaard feels like just the lock faction a lot of the time. You want to lock everything. So I want to preserve the faction identity there with controlling the opponent's board while also giving them a bit more flexibility and allowing them to get points if they're not playing against just a guy that doesn't have lockable units, if that makes sense. So I think that would be a pretty cool ability to have. It might be, too strong, but obviously the numbers can be changed to balance that. So next we have Diplomacy, and this would be akin to kind of old spy mechanics. So this would allow you to boost the engine or whatever, kind of like Intimidate or whatever, whenever you gain intel. So kind of similar as well to Cannibalize, but for Nilfgaard. So whenever you're playing a spy, effectively you're boosting yourself, and you can tweak the number to whatever you want. You could do Diplomacy 2 and it boosts by 2 or whatever. I should have probably put that in, but yeah. So that's when it's on the board, it boosts itself when you are playing spies or gaining intelligence. The next keyword, which I think is a pretty damn cool one, would be Traitor, and this would basically be on your disloyal units. You would have the Traitor tag, and you could then spend intelligence to actually cause that unit to swap sides to your side. I think that would be really damn cool. You could click on your basically spying unit and spend the intelligence to then swap them over. Now, obviously, to balance, you'd maybe want some disloyal units that give intelligence, some that are traitor. You probably wouldn't want both on that card unless it was going to be a strong one, right? Obviously, this ability would be very good on higher strength spies, so maybe you keep it away from those and only put it on low strength spies. But I think it's a very cool ability. It'll allow you to spend your intel in a way that's kind of very interesting and unique, I think, and fits with the idea of the faction very well. And then finally, Assimilate. So this would work as normal. I think they should also make it so that C's abilities work with Assimilate, though, and you could even have that work with the Traitor tag as well, so when they swap sides, the Assimilate also procs. I think that would help that mechanic to actually be prevalent and strong. and it would work very well with spying units. And I think that's how you kind of round up the faction. You make it all about spying, diplomacy, and kind of swapping sides, and also keep some of the deck manipulation that the faction already has in terms of infiltrators and Cynthia and all that stuff, because that stuff is also pretty cool. Okay, next up we have Scoia'tael. So the Ambusher passive, basically you'd have some units with the Ambusher tag, and they would be an Ambusher effectively when you play them. They give you one Ambusher in your your passive store. And then you could have Scouts. These guys would boost themselves by the number of ambushers you have when the opponent passes. So kind of like old Teruvial or Mahakam now. They're kind of these, obviously they wouldn't be very surprising. They'd be on the board. You could see, oh, this guy's got this many ambushers. He's going to get this many points when I pass. But I think that would just be a cool way to kind of make ambushing, it's kind of like a horde ability, I suppose, on the unit. Balances the risk-reward of keeping the ambush points or not. And remember, you wouldn't keep any of these if you're Scoia'tael, any of these points through the rounds. Don't get that as carryover. So there'd be pretty interesting mechanic there in terms of, is it worth it to save or not save your guys? Similar with horde abilities. And yeah, you can just get some extra points on these guys, but they're also vulnerable to removal. They're kind of like an engine, but not in a pretty cool way, and it creates some mind games and thinking about, when do I pass, what do I kill this? I don't know, I think it would be pretty cool. You could also have Sabotage, so this would be a pretty generic kind of fee ability, again, where you spend an amount of ambushers to deal an amount of damage. Now, you could have that as quite a high amount of damage, potentially, I don't know if there's a cap on the amount of ambushes you can have, and it's kind of hard to generate them, right? In theory, you can only maybe gain one every time you play a unit. Then you could have the saboteurs dealing, 3, 4 damage even, maybe, if they're costed well enough, or whatever. So there's definitely a lot of space here. I think the really key thing is, if you're going to introduce these kind of mechanics to other factions, you want them to be different, but kind of similar at the same time. You want them to be doing similar things so it's not too confusing, but also have that unique kind of flair and, ability that the faction ought to have, and the synergies that work there. So I think that's preserved with these in Scoia'tael. Trapper, boost self by 1 whenever you gain an ambusher or a trap flips over. So again, thematically appropriate, right? You've got these guys laying the traps, so whenever you're gaining ambushers, they're getting stronger, and whenever your traps are activating, they're also getting stronger. And that would help with trap archetypes. That'd also just help the kind of gaining of ambushers to actually be worthwhile. But yeah, Harmony would stick as it is right now, because I think it's a pretty cool mechanic and it works pretty well. And finally we have Skellig with Veterancy. So Veterancy is pretty simple, but I want it to act like old veterans did in a way, where you basically are playing a veteran unit, and it increases your Veterancy score for the whole game. It's up by 1. And then when you play a champion, the champion unit has a higher base strength for every Veterancy that you have in your bank. So basically a return to old veterans and Veterancy, and I think you could give a lot of units in Skellig low base strength, potentially, but the champion tag, and then, quite a few units could have the veteran tag as well, and you could then stack up your guys. That would be kind of Skellig's way to carry over strength. It fits with the idea of them resurrecting cards. You get higher base strength cards, you resurrect them. I don't think they ever want to bring back base strength, but I think it was a really interesting mechanic that allowed you to do a lot. And it helped with factional diversity and everything. So that's probably what I would add for Skellig. As I said already, Skellig is already pretty fleshed out, with Bloodthirst, Berserk, and Discard all being pretty well fleshed out mechanics. But I think that would be a cool little addition to the faction that I would definitely, I'd find that pretty damn thematically appropriate and pretty fun to play with. And really, yeah, the idea here is to give every faction a way to get carryover through the passive ability, but give them all a different little flair, a different kind of approach to the way that they amass that carryover, the way they even just play the faction in general, in terms of, Northern Realms, we're all about engines and giving them zeal and protecting them and shielding our guys. Monsters, we're all about consuming our dudes and destroying the enemy and, eating things, right? Nilfgaard, we're all about subterfuge and going behind the enemy lines and diplomacy and all this treacherous, messing with the opponent's stuff. Scoia'tael, we're all about ambushing and traps and lying in wait and guerrilla warfare and all this stuff. Skellig, we're about our champion warriors and our veterans, and we're bloodthirsty and we go crazy. Pretty much that. is all I have to say. I think it would be really, really cool to have some more sort of faction diversity and whatnot in the game. I don't know, they could maybe even do this in an upcoming expansion if they had the balls to do it, adding in these kind of passive effects and revamping a bunch of cards. I would honestly prefer to see something like this in an expansion rather than just straight, here's a bunch of new cards. But, you know, unfortunately I don't think that's how the future of Gwent will be looking, but I don't know. Syndicate was pretty cool, honestly, in terms of the mechanics it brings, and I wanted to bring together some thoughts that I think are pretty cool and could work very well for Gwent, and kind of a return to many of the things that people enjoyed about old Gwent and closed beta, without hopefully breaking the game too much. But yeah, let me know if you agree or disagree with this stuff. If you think I have good ideas, bad ideas, any of your own ideas, I would love to hear. And, you know, I guess if enough people wanted this, then maybe there's a chance something similar could happen in the future, or some kind of faction passive could be introduced to the other factions, because I think that's what the game needs right now. Playing Syndicate and then playing a different faction, you really feel the difference in terms of a lack of kind of factional identity and faction passive that Syndicate does fortunately have. But yeah, that pretty much does it for me, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Do remember to subscribe for more videos as always, and I'll see you next time.